We just talked to your brother Johnny, who's the head wrestling coach at Sacred Heart. He said you guys trained in a bomb shelter. Talk about that, what that was like early up training in a bomb shelter.
Yeah, it's cool. I, if I went back now, I'd have to duck on certain parts of the mats, literally. If you throw a guy, you're, you're hitting the AC vents. It was, it was a dungeon, but it was the appeal that we had as North Country. If you're from the North Country in New York, you're already grizzled. The weather's awful. It's very blue collar. I call it God's country because it's awesome. And it's like my kids say, it's a magical place, but it's very rural and grizzled. So when we would go to practice, we would have to go to the elementary bomb shelter, and the mats were 40 years old. They were probably reconditioned 15 times. They were really hard, but it added to the toughness that we had as wrestlers growing up. What we lacked in workout partners, by the time we were upperclassmen, and competition, we gained in, we'd go out for runs and your scarf would freeze to your face, and I think we brought that toughness, not just to, throughout our high school, but brought it to the Big Ten. I think it helped us survive in the Big Ten.
Relationship with your dad, how did you guys coexist together? How did you thrive together? How did that relationship fire?
I was interesting. Again, I owe him everything. My father, by the time I became a sophomore, I thought I knew everything, and I would let him know it. But my sophomore year was the last year that he was still coaching before he became athletic director. So he was at the Division III Nationals. I went to the New York State tournament. The month leading up to my sophomore year in high school, he kept saying, "You got to run before school. You're going to need that extra little bit of condition." I'm like, "I'm in great shape. My weight's fine. I'm in great shape. I don't want to catch a cold out there. It's freezing. I want to get my sleep." And so I would do it maybe once or twice a week instead of 3 times a week like he asked me to. Well, back then, the overtime rules were 1-1-1, right? So twice I got reversed with a second or two to go. The last one, I just ran out of gas and this was in the semis of states. So I lost in double overtime, and I came home. I said, "Dad, you were right. I'm going to listen to you from now on." It was very, and at that point, he kind of backed off because he knew I loved wrestling. So he knew he didn't have to push me, and that I would push myself. And it became a great relationship from there on out. My senior year, I didn't have a single workout partner at Canton High School, the high school that I was. So my dad, and he was the athletic director at the time, in charge of 26 sports. He said, I'm going to make a commitment, and we're going to go to Montreal 3 times a week, 2.5 hours away, 5 hours round trip, three times a week, and wrestle at the Montreal Wrestling Club and train. And at that time, Russia, it was the Soviet Union. So communism was still running rampant there. And essentially people were trying to get out of the communist life. And so these 28, 30-year-old Russian men who barely spoke English, and they just mopped me up. Bad. Like, it was like abuse. My dad would just stand there with a stopwatch and he'd say 18 seconds, 14. And that was the amount of time that it took for me to stretch out how long and that's where I learned how to scramble and fight and, really learned how to scramble. But in that course of a year, I got so much better because I was going against man strength and against Russians who didn't really even care for Americans, so it was interesting.